Hello everyone, and welcome to this episode of my fan specialization series. In this video, I'll be going over a light armor elite specialization I have made. The subjects I will be covering include weapon type and skills, utility skills, profession mechanics or changes, while finally ending on minor traits and a sampling of some trait ideas. Be sure to check out my other elite specialization ideas in the playlist and be on the lookout for more of these videos. Today we're going to be covering the Mesmer elite specialization I have made, the Enchanter. Now the Enchanter is my version of a ranged DPS with a focus on healing for the Mesmer. The Chronomancer has a lot of boon support with some minor healing with wells. The Mirage is focused on damage, condition damage, and evasion, so I wanted to have a playstyle that focused on longer ranged attacks while also altering the mechanic of the shatters. So let's begin with the weapon for this elite specialization, the Longbow. So let's start with the very first skill for the Longbow, of course the auto attack. I've made Piercing Tune. String your bow with a Piercing 2, dealing damage. It's a pretty basic skill. It will pierce enemies, so you don't have to worry about not hitting your target necessarily, and has a range of 1200. Moving to the second skill, this is where we're seeing some of that supportive aspects. In my specialization, we have Harmonizing Ground. Send an arrow of healing properties to land in an area, creating a field of mending magic. The arrow deals slight damage to enemies upon landing. I wanted this damage aspect just a little bit, just to maintain, but this is mostly for the healing. It'll heal allies over a duration of 5 seconds, range of 1200, area of 240, and that's all I have to say about that skill. Moving on to the third skill. This is the Clone Generation skill, which also buffs you and allies. So strum your bow, creating a mesmerizing tune. You summon a clone to shoot arrows from afar, while empowering yourself with a spell and buffing allies with boons. There's 3 things going on. 1, clone summon, pretty basic. 2, you gain a personal buff to increase your damage by 15% for 6 seconds. And then thirdly, you're going to be granting might and quickness to allies in a larger area. These boons are not applied to you, however, be on the lookout for a trait later on which might come back to augment this skill a little bit more. To the fourth skill, we have Sonic Boom Bolt. Fire an arrow dealing heavy damage and quickly stunning them. Create a phantasm that fires a spread of arrows over a duration. These arrows deal heavy damage to all enemies in the cone of the arrows. So Sonic Boom Bolt, the arrow itself will deal damage and stun for half a second. The phantasm, however, is where the more of the damage comes into play. I was thinking it's kind of just like a wider turret. In a way, it'll spawn and it'll start shooting out a bunch of arrows 3 times, so three waves. You're gonna want to try to dodge this. That's my Phantasm generating skill, because of course this is a 2-hander, so we need a clone for 3 and a phantasm for 4. And then finally, for the 5th skill, we have Transcendent Symphony. Conjure a portal holding chaotic magic. Rapidly fire arrows through this portal during the spell's duration. Firing arrows which maim enemies and bolster allies. Conditions and boons are applied randomly. So for the damaging aspect of this skill, you'll fire a bunch of arrows through a portal, landing in a targeted area. If it hits an enemy, it'll deal damage and has the potential to apply vulnerability, weakness, or confusion. However, it's only 1 condition per arrow that lands, and it's random, in tune with that chaotic nature of Mesmer. Now, if an arrow hits an ally, it'll do healing, and it has a chance of applying regeneration, retaliation, or resistance. Once again, the boons are random like the conditions. A very long cast time too, 3 seconds. I want this to feel something more powerful and much more influential in a combat scenario. So those were my longbow skills. Now we're going to be moving over to the profession. Do I want to do profession or do I want to do utilities? I'm going to be doing utilities next, and then we'll go from there. So, to the utilities. Time for the utilities. So for the Enchanter, I've decided to give them shout skills. Now, I was very tempted to just brand them as chants. However, I thought shout, we already have them. It's better to stick with what we have to maybe fill out some runes and other, synergies. However, they're still titled chants because shouts don't really have any definition to them, I guess. So, for the healing skill, we have a Chant of Empowered Healing. You chant a verse of healing magic to restore your wounds and enhance the healing of allies for a short time. This is a self-heal, but does not heal others around you. It'll simply put a buff on them for 5 seconds, which will improve the healing they receive. This is a radius of 900, and it affects 10 allies. A lot of these chants are much larger in radius, which might be slightly different to normal shouts. Still, shouts do have quite a large radius. These are just a little bit more. Next is Chant of Chaotic Shielding. Chant a song granting yourself and allies barrier and, additionally, Chaos Aura. I almost said armor, but Chaos Armor has been renamed to Chaos Aura in the recent balance patch. So this is a defensive utility, applying barrier, further helping allies, and then the Chaos Aura to allies as well. This chant or shout only affects 5 allies. I think 10 for this one could be a little too strong, so I just went with the normal 5. Pretty self-explanatory. And then next shout is Chant of Stolen Glory. Chant a song ripping boons off of enemies and revealing them. These ripped boons are granted to you and allies around your location. So let me explain my idea behind the skill that I've made. So you'll select a target location and it will affect 2 enemy players or, AI. If they have boons on them, they will rip 2 of the boons, and then around you'll spread those 2 boons to your 5 allies, including yourself. So it's a boon rip with a reveal. Boon rip, boon transfer to allies, and reveal. It's pretty strong, so I was like 30-second cooldown. You can sit down. So if you want to pause and mull over this trait, if you don't like it, I just wanted to have something more purely utility based. Next shout is Chant of the Phantasm. This one could be very strong, but I like it anyways. So you chant a song converting all clones around you temporarily to a phantasm of your current weapon set. These phantasms will perform the attacks for a duration and then return to their original clone form. Any existing phantasms that are already up before they actually are turned into clones and you happen to use this skill will have their duration extended. So they will get to use their abilities a little bit more for more time. This shout heavily augments and modifies your damage potential as a Phantasm Mesmer, if you are, say, a Mesmer player who likes to focus on phantasms. So this is a radius of 900 around you. It will change to a maximum of 3 of your clones that are already summoned to a phantasm of your weapon, or of your offhand. If you don't have a weapon per se, like if you're a niche thing, it'll probably just auto set to sword, and they will be transformed for 5 seconds. So they will continually repeat their skills for 5 seconds. If you have a summoned phantasm that's already alive, you will extend the duration for 2 seconds, allowing their skill to possibly refresh on their internal cooldown to use the ability again, depending on what phantasm you have up. So that is what I have for Chant of the Phantasm. Further clarification could be if you have a Phantasmal Defender, their block will last for 2 seconds longer, and their taunt subsequently, so they can get more out of this skill. I almost made this the elite, and part of me thinks that this could still be an elite of some ways. And then the final chant, or shout, that was a long-winded one, is pretty basic. Chant of Butterflies. Chant a song calling on chaotic butterflies to swarm around a location. Enemies struck are damaged, while allies struck are healed. This is a simple damage skill to enemies, an AoE damaging, and a simple healing for allies, and a much larger radius as well, 360, and this is a targeted shout. And then for the elite, we have Chant of Enchanting Dreams. Chant a legendary song of nightmares and dreams. Enemies to catch wind of this song are wrapped in barbed silk, unable to move while receiving damage over time. Allies affected are wrapped in a protective cocoon of magic, preventing them from falling in combat while healing them for a percentage of damage that they take. So once again, the duality function of these shouts. This is a good emote skill to lock down enemies, be it in PvP or PvE, but it will also take damage, not crazy damage, but 800 in 4 packets, 4 installments. And then for allies, the function is much stronger in my opinion. They can't go down for 3 seconds, while this is also active if they receive damage. 35% of damage that they receive will be converted to healing. Only 5 targets. 5 enemies and 5 allies, if you're looking at that way. In radius of 600. This is not 900, because that might be a little too strong, so I wanted to just bring the radius down a little bit. So those were my utility skills for the Enchanter. A lot of complex shouts and some basic ones, but a lot of shouting and songs. Next, we're going to be talking about profession mechanics. Time for the profession mechanics. Now, in line with the Enchanter and the music playstyle, I have transformed shatters into sonnets. They're still basically shatters, however, they're just renamed a little bit. Of course, with paralleled functions. You'll see what I mean. Let's start with the very first shatter, Sonnet of Healing. Your clones play a song of hope, healing allies around them. Healing is increased with each active clone. A player can only be affected once per clone. This is similar to the Shades. So wherever your clones currently are, they will play this song, healing allies around them. This will heal 3 allies per clone. So you can get a total of 9 heals. Actually 12, because this will play around yourself as well. As you might be able to see, this is not a damaging skill. It is in fact a healing skill. So, and also, additionally, this shatter / sonnet will not destroy your clones, but the later ones will. We'll get to that. The next shatter is Sonnet of Purity. Your clones play a song of clarity, each clone converting a condition to a boon. A player can only be affected once per clone. So if an ally is within the radius of your skill for this sonnet, they'll have 1 condition converted to a boon. It's not very, very powerful per se. However, this would allow you to get a wide net of clearing at least 1 condition on a total of 12 allies. I keep messing up the numbers, my math. Radius of 210. This skill does not shatter your clones. Now we're getting into the actual ones that will shatter your clones indefinitely after their effect. So for the F3, we have Sonnet of Resilience. Your clones move to a target location and begin to perform as one, creating a zone with pulsing stability for a short duration and causing stability that is used to negate a CC effect to heal for a small amount. Your clones are destroyed once the skill ends. Now let me clarify if need be. Basically, you'll target a location for all your clones to go scurrying over to. They will play their song, creating a field which will grant stability to allies. Now the stability is stability. it'll be on them. If the stability is used to negate a control effect, say a player has a stability on them from this skill, and they are subsequently knocked down or try to knock down, the stability will be consumed. If this happens, they will gain a small heal. This will affect 10 allies, radius of 300. It'll last for 4 seconds, so not incredibly long. This is a pretty nice small window to make sure that your allies are up and running and not being knocked down. And then finally, we have Sonnet of Sanctity, the F4. So this says your clones play a quick tune, granting allies near your clones alacrity and creating an area of safety, allowing allies to pass through but keeping allies or enemies out. Your clones shatter. This is similar to Sanctity. I kind of messed up on the tooltip here, but you will once again make a target location. You'll use a skill, alacrity will be pulsed, and then your clones will run over to a location, creating basically a ring of warding, which will grant alacrity as well. So a quick burst of alacrity, and then a field. That's basically it. So those were the shatters. Next, we're going to be talking about some of the traits for the Enchanter. Time for one of my favorite sections to always do with these elite specialization creations. We have the traits. We're going to start with a sample of one of the minors, which is Enchanter's Harp. Healing is increased when healing allies from a greater range. This takes inspiration from a couple other traits that are already in Guild Wars 2, primarily Dragon Hunter's Minor, which increases damage at further ranges. Considering I want the Enchanter and subsequently the Mesmer Elite Specialization to have more of a supportive healing playstyle, I decided to flip it and just affect healing rather than damage. So your minimum healing increase is 5%, and then when you're at maximum range, healing skills will heal 15% more. So just as a little, little change up to the already existing status quo that we have of a lot of damage modifiers, let's throw in some healing every now and then. So next up, we're going to be talking about the major traits. Let's start with the Major Adept. This is fine-tuned. Enemies you strike who are below 50% health grant you quickness for a duration. Dazzling Performance will now grant boons to you as well. Remember how I said pay attention to the traits for the third skill that the Longbow has? Now it's kind of coming full circle. The quickness is just partially for if you are playing with heavier damage, ranged damage, or melee, to have a little bit more quickness. And then the Dazzling Performance is also if you want to just continually stack your own quickness and might, if you maybe have a hard time if you're running like full shout build. So that is the Adept. Moving over to the Major Master trait, we have Reversal of Purpose. Your Phantasmal Enchanter now heals allies with their volley attacks, instead of damaging. Additionally, Piercing Tune now heals allies it passes through. Now, I never mentioned this, but the Phantasmal Enchanter is the Phantasm on the Longbow 4 skill. I know, I'm so smart because we already have a Phantasmal Disenchanter. Now we have a Phantasmal Enchanter. I'm so creative, yay! So instead of actually damaging enemies with its cone attack, this will now heal allies with the cone attack. Additionally, this trait creates a minor healing aspect to your auto attack, which is kind of similar to maybe like a Staff Druid, as it heals allies in its path. This will heal, your auto attack will now heal allies as the projectile travels. So that is the Master trait. And then finally, for the Grand Master. This first part is pretty, standard from what we have. Might grants you more power and less condition damage. This is what we've kind of had with, like, say, necromancers now, and I think maybe one or two other professions have it. And then additionally, this will augment your Longbow 5th skill. Transcendent Symphony now turns into Chaos Barrage. Now, Chaos Barrage I have also fully fleshed out. Chaos Barrage completely mitigates any supportive aspect to favor ranged DPS aspects. So now you shoot through a portal of pure demolishing magics. Enemies struck by arrows are dealt damage and receive a random condition. Now, instead of having 10 arrows to attack 10 enemies and 10 arrows to heal allies, this just converts those 10 healing arrows into additional 10 damaging arrows. So there's going to be much more damage and a lot more not boons, but a lot more conditions being applied. So these conditions are not necessarily damaging conditions, more debilitating conditions. So it's vulnerability, blind, chill, slow, or burning. Burning is the one damaging one, which doesn't need a lot of condition damage to be put into it for it to have like a decent effect. So once again, these conditions are random. I didn't say random, but they are random. I don't want each arrow to be applying vulnerability, blind. That's just too many conditions. So those are the traits that I have. One trait showing augmenting your possible damage with quickness, one master trait focusing in on the healing aspect, and then a final grandmaster trait where I wanted to focus in once again on the damaging aspect. Of course, these are only 3 traits. I could always make a full 9 traits with 3 adept, 3 master, 3 grandmaster. However, and once again, for the sake of this series, it's just more of a sampler. So those were my cheats. This is the final outro section. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed. Like the video if you liked it. Comment down below your thoughts on what I have created for the Enchanter. Put down anything that you would like to see in a Mesmer Elite Specialization. Maybe you don't want them to be a bard, musician-esque, you know, subclass. Maybe you want them to be like a pistol-wielding duelist, but I feel like we already kind of have that with the Mirage. Or if you want them to be a bruiser with like a hammer, you never know. This is what I've come up with, especially with a longbow. I feel like they needed another ranged because the last 2 elite specializations have been melee oriented. And yeah, I'd love to hear your comments. Once again, this is going up on Patreon early, so all my links are down below if you would like to support me on Patreon, or just connect with me on Discord and Twitter. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Bye, everyone!